you ever wondered, in the middle of the night, what happens to a person's mind if they fall into a coma for years? If a child, say at the age of 5, falls into a coma and wakes up 10 years later, will they have the mind of a 15-year-old? Do long-term comas even exist? Or is that just a myth? Welcome to Midnight Reflections, where curiosity never sleeps. Now let's find out. Where curiosity never sleeps. The basic experiences that shape a person are gained through conscious living. For someone to mature mentally or gain knowledge, they must be fully aware of what's happening around them. This is logical. To learn a fact or acquire new skills, we need to be awake to see and hear things directly. For instance, if someone is asleep and we sit beside them reciting, "The reaction of calcium chloride with silver nitrate produces silver chloride," or tell them about a major world event, or share any other piece of information, will their brain process it and add it to their experiences? The answer is absolutely no. And that is exactly what happens during a prolonged coma. A person in a coma is supposed to be completely unaware of their surroundings because they aren't interacting with their external senses. It's as if they're in a state of deep sleep. But before diving into the details, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let's clarify an important point. There's a difference between a coma and a vegetative state. If we hear that someone has been unconscious in a hospital for 3 months, we often say they're in a coma. But medically speaking, that's not entirely accurate. A coma is a state of unconsciousness that typically lasts minutes or a few hours, such as a diabetic coma. In some cases, it may extend to days or weeks. However, if it persists for months, it's no longer referred to as a coma, but as a vegetative state. The distinction between the two is significant, and we'll delve into this topic in a separate episode. Now, what might happen to a person's consciousness if they enter a vegetative state, or, to put it more casually, a prolonged coma? There are some key patterns shared among individuals in such states. For example, their bodies follow natural sleep cycles, and their automatic bodily functions, like breathing and circulation, continue to operate normally. However, the understanding of consciousness during these states remained unclear to doctors for a long time. The prevailing belief was that someone in a coma was entirely disconnected from the world and unable to sense anything around them. This perception was radically challenged by a groundbreaking medical study conducted by a research team from the University of Cambridge in collaboration with the National Institute for Health Research. They tested 32 patients who had been in prolonged comas. Doctors used to claim that patients in prolonged comas do not respond to external stimuli and have no trace of consciousness. However, researchers conducted tests and examinations on these patients using functional magnetic resonance imaging, fMRI, a device that measures brain activity, as well as electroencephalography, EEG. Although the patients' eyes were closed and they appeared to be in a deep slumber, the researchers stood before them and spoke loudly, saying things like, "We want you to imagine yourself playing a game. Imagine yourself walking through the house you grew up in." They repeated these statements multiple times. During this interaction, the devices recorded brain activity, and the astonishing discovery was that the region of the brain responsible for planning showed signals similar to those of healthy individuals. These reactions didn't occur in all patients, but did manifest in some. Overall, the results were groundbreaking and entirely transformed our understanding of comas. What we can infer from this is that there are two possible scenarios for someone in a coma. If the person awakens, their level of awareness will be stuck at the moment they entered the coma, as they were essentially part of the group that showed no response to the stimuli around them. Alternatively, the person might have some degree of awareness. For example, they may hear and process certain events occurring around them, which could lead to their consciousness gradually developing and evolving, even while in a coma. On the other hand, to avoid overly optimistic expectations, in most cases of prolonged comas, a person's awareness remains frozen at the moment they entered the coma, making this the more common outcome. One famous example of this is the story of Terry Wallace, who was involved in a car accident in 1984 at the age of 19. At the time, he was riding in a truck with a friend. The truck veered off course and fell from a bridge they were crossing, resulting in his friend's immediate death. As for Wallace, he suffered from quadriplegia and fell into a prolonged coma a few months later. At the time, his daughter had just been born and was only a few weeks old. Wallace remained in the coma for 20 years. In 2003, his mother, as usual, was checking on him in his room when she was shocked to hear him calling out to her. No one could comprehend what had happened. When doctors examined him, they noticed that part of the brain damage he had suffered had begun to heal spontaneously. What was remarkable was that when Terry woke up, he still believed it was 1984, the year of his accident. When his family showed him his daughter, now 20 years old, he was stunned and could hardly believe she was his child. Although Terry Wallace lived until the age of 57, his consciousness and memories remained those of a much younger man, essentially frozen at a time 20 years earlier. This example reinforces the idea that there are two possible scenarios for someone in a prolonged coma. The first is that their consciousness becomes frozen at the time they entered the coma. The second, and much rarer scenario, is that the person retains some level of awareness, hearing and processing events around them. In such cases, their consciousness can continue to develop and evolve even while in a coma. Speaking of awareness and consciousness, there's a medical condition called locked-in syndrome, which resembles a prolonged coma. In this condition, the person loses the ability to move and communicate with those around them and is completely paralyzed. However, the difference is that they remain fully aware and conscious of everything happening around them, even if others don't realize it. This is exactly what happened to Martin Pistorius. When he was 12 years old, he contracted a mysterious illness that doctors believed to be cryptococcal meningitis. The disease completely robbed him of his ability to move, and over time, he also lost the ability to communicate through his eyes and even to speak. As his condition worsened, the doctors told his parents to take him home to rest, saying they didn't expect him to wake up or live much longer. His parents brought him home but refused to give up hope. His father cared for him every day, lifting him into bed, setting an alarm to turn him every 2 hours at night to prevent bed sores, and regularly taking him to a care center. This was their life for 12 years. The astonishing moment came when Martin's doctor noticed something unusual. While speaking in front of him, she realized he was responding with subtle eye movements. She understood that Martin was aware of what was being said and was internally reacting, as though he wanted to express himself but couldn't. She informed his parents and advised them to transfer Martin to a more specialized care center. Initially skeptical, his parents eventually agreed. After further examinations, it became clear that Martin was fully conscious, with no cognitive impairments. With continued care and therapy, Martin gradually regained some upper body movement and eventually returned to a more normal life. By 2009, he had even gotten married and later became a father. The only lasting symptoms Martin experienced after his condition improved were difficulty speaking and an inability to move his legs normally. His cognitive abilities, however, remained excellent and unaffected to this day. But that's not the strangest part of Martin's story. What truly stands out is what he revealed about his experiences during the locked-in state he endured. Just 2 years after falling into his coma-like condition, Martin began to regain consciousness. He became fully aware of everything happening around him, but tragically, he couldn't move, speak, or express his thoughts. It was as if he were trapped inside his own body. At first, he started to gauge time by observing the sunlight moving through his bedroom window. He could hear everything and was fully aware of the events around him. He even remembered overhearing his mother once say, "I hope my son dies to find peace." Martin also recalled learning about global events through conversations between his family members. For instance, he knew about Princess Diana's death, Nelson Mandela's legacy, and other significant happenings. On a lighter note, Martin confessed that he despised Barney, the children's character. Caregivers at the center would often sit him in a chair and play Barney's shows for hours. He wished he could tell them how much he disliked the cartoon, but of course, he couldn't. Martin later recounted all these experiences in his memoir, Ghost Boy. In the book, he explained how he was fully conscious while everyone around him assumed he was in a coma. Now you know? Got more midnight questions? Drop them in the comments. Stay curious, and I'll see you in another Midnight Mystery.